Hello, I'm Sarah Russell, former producer of the ADHD Skills Lab. I'm thrilled to introduce my latest project, the Neurodivergent Report, an educational podcast dedicated to empowering neurodivergent individuals with accessible scientific knowledge and amplifying their exuberant stories. In each episode, we'll explore topics like the genetics and heritability of neurodiversity, alongside practical strategies for managing executive dysfunction and emotional dysregulation. Together, we can learn to heal in community. However you are able to engage, thank you for being here. Hello, and welcome back to the Neurodivergent Report. I'm your host, Sarah Russell, also known as a hysterical woman, and I'm here today with Lindsey Kee. Lindsey is an executive coach currently living the digital nomad life, but based in Arizona, spending lots of time in Oregon. Lindsey helps to teach women how to listen to their body and learn to trust those cues again, which I love. So, hi, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be on today.
So, Lindsey, you work with high achieving women, usually burnt out. Why?
I love this question, and it's super simple, and because of me. That was me. I think you'll hear a lot of people who do the kind of work that I do. Um, Actually, a lot of people who do very purposeful work will have this very similar answer, and they'll say, I now help the people that I used to be or where I used to be. Right. And that was very much for me. So I guess it would be appropriate, since this is the Neurodivergent Report podcast, to kind of start by saying I am a late identified autistic and ADHD woman. And I did not know this about myself until I was in oh, I was somewhere in my 30s. I don't remember exactly, because it's been kind of an interesting journey from awareness to resistance and suppression to kind of acceptance, and then ultimately to where I am now, which is embracing it and celebrating it and working with it instead of trying to fight it and hide it, or not talk about it and pretend it's just not there. So I was someone who was very high achieving and kind of defined my own worth through my work, which is very common, especially with women. I had a history of kind of the opposite side of high achieving. Well, it's not really the opposite side, but it's another way of saying high achieving, which was people pleasing, right? So that's like in your social side. And so I kind of took that with me into my career path, and I just focused on achievement, and I just burned myself out to the max. Um, there's a little bit longer version of my story on my website. But the short story is I burned myself out to the point where I ultimately landed myself in the emergency room because of all these chronic stress related illnesses. And one day my body was just like, nope, I'm going to make you stop. And so at that point, I had a lot of kind of reassessing what I had been doing in my life and what wasn't working and what I wanted, which was a huge question mark. And it was something that had been a long time coming. It had been a few years when I had started to realize and started to feel like I'm really unhappy. I'm really unwell. I'm very unhealthy in this type of lifestyle where I'm just pursuing my career at the detriment of literally all other categories of my life. And finding myself in that place where, going to the emergency room is never fun, but it's kind of like this before and after point where it was like, wow, my life has to be really different after this. And there are a couple other things that happened within a very short time span that led to me just having kind of a full blow up of my life and figuring out how to take care of myself at the very basic levels of like, honest to goodness, I did not know really what to name my emotions. I knew happy, sad, and mad. That was it. That's all that was allowed as I learned it or knew it. And I had to really start at those very foundational building blocks to figure out how to operate myself as a well-adjusted human being in this world, and then figure out what on earth did I want to do with my life, because what I was doing wasn't it. Couldn't live like that, couldn't work like that. Like, what was the point of it all? So that's a very long-winded answer to say, why do I do this work? Because that's where I was. And I know there are so many women and men. I just happen to specialize in helping with helping women with this situation. There are so many people who are in that very situation where they're like, is this it? Like, is there something wrong with me? Because I feel this bad, this burned out, this exhausted and unfulfilled. And I don't know what else to do. I don't know what to do with my life. I don't even know what I want.
I'm trying really hard not to talk about capitalism right now.
Yep.
Because it really just feels as if, yeah, we are all sort of socialized from a young age to be um, worker bees, to value productivity and what we can create. And to some degree, I love that we're brought up to be helpful people and we intend to serve, but I think some of us are held to maybe different standards with that, or maybe are able to open different doors than others. So, anyway, now I'm getting in the weeds, but yes, definitely lots of people out there, probably millions, if not billions, of people out there who are sort of looking around and going, wait, is there something wrong with me because I don't value this like
Yeah.
everybody else seems to?
Yeah. Or it's a problem with you because the system isn't meant to make you well or allow you to be well and
Or
fulfilled.
accept diversity.
Or accept diversity. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, we'll get into that more, I'm sure, as we go. But that was a big thing where me not knowing until much later into my adult life about my neurodivergence, I was I was fighting a battle that I didn't even know was there
Hmm.
with how to take care of myself, how to be aware of myself and what I needed within a system that is very rigid and structured and really not allowed or allowing of flexibility for any neurotype.
Yes. Of course, there are a lot of late diagnosed autistics and ADHD people out there now who sort of, yeah, have been fighting these battles. Um, and when we say that, we assume mental battles, but actually, the undiagnosed autistic experience can be very physically painful.
Yes.
Um, and
Yeah.
sensory issues. And again, the workplace not always being accommodating of those sensory issues. Um, yeah, so that's what I
Yeah.
think about when I think of the struggle and the fight. But that's me being on the other side of it.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm at a place in my life now in my work where I don't work in an office. I work from home
Mhm.
/ anywhere that I choose to work. And when I was back in the corporate world, in the kind of that realm, I just keep thinking like how bright it was and how constantly noisy it was. Even when you have an office with a door, it's still noisy and you can still see people moving by and all of that movement and all of that noise and all of those lights. It's a lot. It's a lot for any human system, regardless of neurotype.
Yes. Absolutely. And the issue that we face sometimes as neurodivergents is that we're not always able to discriminate between which stimuli we're supposed to be picking up and which stimuli we're supposed to be ignoring. Because all humans experience millions of bits of information constantly.
Yeah,
Um, and it's like our brain's job to tell us which ones are
exactly.
important. And we have to do that in split seconds. Um, So, you work in sort of an unconventional way from home. You're an executive coach. Now, I'm going to admit to everyone right now that I kept insisting that she was executive functioning coach. But in fact, I've just had executive functioning on the brain for a little bit too long. So, an executive coach. Do you want to just tell me what that is and what are some things that you might do with
Yeah.
your clients?
Yeah, yeah, sure. It's funny. So where I am on social media, I'm almost entirely on just on LinkedIn, which is, for those of you who aren't maybe familiar on there, it's more of a business social media platform. So to call myself an executive coach is a little bit more has a little bit different vibe than if I were on maybe some other platform. So I love this question because it can be really confusing as to like what does that really mean? So when I say I'm an executive coach, I mean that I primarily work with women executives. and leaders. So women who are in leadership of some type will typically kind of fall under the some sort of high achieving, career focused, often very burned out or approaching burned out kind of situation. And they have put their career so much at the forefront of their life that a lot of the other categories, kind of like I was mentioning earlier with my journey, a lot of the other categories of their life are suffering. Maybe their health, maybe their, relationships, maybe anything, even their social life. For me, that was another thing. It was like I just worked all of the time and I had very little social life. And certainly didn't have a lot of time to take care of myself. So when I say executive coach, that's what I mean is I work with women who are executives and or in leadership roles.
Amazing. I'm I'm picturing pantsuits and pearls.
That
Show
would
up like
be
that or no?
it. Yes, and right. That has to be a yes, and I think as our as our work world has changed, especially in the last 5 years since 2020, a lot of folks have gone working hybrid or working remote or kind of shifting priorities, even as they remain in kind of a corporate world or a 9 to 5 type of job. There's a little bit more relaxation in a lot of ways where people are what they're wearing, but yeah, that's kind of your conventional um, sort of vision of like what a woman executive or a woman leader might be. But
Stereotype.
it doesn't always appear that way.
All right. Well, I'm really curious to talk to you about the nervous system literacy portion of your work because, um, yeah, in my own sort of last 5 years of being like, am I having a trauma experience? Am I having like a burnout situation? Am I just really overwhelmed with society right now? Um, Nervous system work is a chef's kiss. It's the only thing that's
Well
working
put.
for me
Yeah.
right now. um, so why are you into it? Um, and how do you start with someone?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. So why am I into it? I'm gonna talk about myself again.
Yeah, great.
Because that's really, I mean, that's where this all starts, right? Like when I think for a lot of us, especially those of us who struggle with feeling like we don't have a purpose in life, we don't have some specific gift or like purpose, right? Which was me, right? And a lot of people have this thing where they're like, "What's wrong with me?" There's nothing wrong with you, right? You're just probably in not the quite right environment for you, or you're working against some of your natural gifts and talents and or needs, right? So why did I get so into understanding the nervous system? Why did I get into this work? It kind of all goes back to the answer is I found myself in the emergency room, right? And I had some other um, big life events that year within the span of a couple of months that were really unusual. And my body was just done. I had been, very sick for a few years. And all this time I did not slow down in my career because that was the only thing that I had as I thought like my purpose or the thing that I was trying to do and work toward who I was. Actually, that's the only thing I thought I was and had value in. So getting to know my emotions also meant getting to know how those feel in the body. And when
Yes.
you get to know how the emotions feel in the body, you get to understanding and learning how to interpret the messages that those emotions are trying to tell you through your body. And all of that is different types of, I'm making this very as simple as I can. Essentially, that's your nervous system communicating with you. It's also your intuition communicating with you, trying to tell you what you need, and whether that's adding something to your life or taking something away from your given situation or as like an ongoing type of thing. So nervous system literacy, I love that term because we really have to learn how to feel in our body and become aware of those things and those messages so that we can learn how to regulate when we are dysregulated. And
The
nervous system,
sensation of perception.
yeah, exactly. And this term nervous system dysregulation is I really appreciate how more common it is becoming. it's a word that so many people are saying and they're hearing and they're like, what is this thing? So I appreciate that, but it can get a little bit confusing. But really, going back to the question that you asked, which was, why do I care about this? Because I think that we all could use more self-awareness around what's happening in our body from a mental, emotional perspective, so that we can understand the physical, so that we can then adjust and feel better and have access to our intuition and have access to our higher brain to know who we are and what we want and what needs to change so we can actually have a better life. Because it doesn't have to feel crappy and painful and overwhelming as often as it might for you right now.
Yeah, for a lot of us, it seems like that's like the only option on the table. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it shouldn't be. It wasn't, I feel like it's not supposed to be. So
It's not supposed to be. It doesn't have to be that way. But until you know another way, that's where that
exactly.
internalized thing comes from, where you're like, well, if I feel this bad all the time, if I can't get to happy, like I see other people apparently doing so, what's wrong with me? What's broken in me? And we just stop there because we just feel so hopeless and helpless. And at that point we're uninformed, uneducated, because we don't even know where to look to get information to help us get out of that place.
Yeah, I used to use the phrase emotional dysregulation a lot, but I'm actually starting to understand that the nervous system dysregulation is a little bit more accurate. Because, like, yeah, I mean, it might start as an emotional dysregulation, but then that sort of starts like a whole chain of events in your body. The emotions will release sort of neurotransmitters or hormones or whatever messengers in the body to tell your body to respond to these emotional states. Um, and so it really becomes like people think like, oh, you have emotional problems, like you just need to fix your head. It's like actually, this emotional problem is everywhere in my body right now,
Yeah.
and I am physically in pain. Um,
Yeah.
gosh, yeah, people start their mornings like that as they get ready for their unfulfilling jobs that they
Yeah.
worked so hard to get, though. Like
Exactly.
the amount of work that
Yep.
you put in. So it's like, well, how do I give this up now? So I totally get sort of the push and pull. And so I feel like part of your work with this and with the coaching the women is meant to sort of help them be comfortable where they are or decide if they need to shift, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously
That's
you're
a,
not going to meet with someone and be like, oh, you need to quit your job.
yeah, it's not for me to say, right? Maybe their job is really wonderful. Maybe it's just that they need to find other outlets for for certain things. Maybe they just need a break. Maybe they need to learn how to rest, and it's not a problem with their job or their industry or
Maybe
their
they
boss.
forgot how
Maybe
to
there's no
play.
exactly. Like there are so many things, and I've always loved to tell people that it's like I am not here to tell you that you need to do what I did. I left the corporate world because that's what felt best for me. That's what was something that I needed and wanted. But that's not what everybody needs and wants. And it's perfectly okay to still want and like a 9 to 5 job. That's okay. But finding different ways to take care of yourself and knowing who you are outside of your work, regardless of what your work looks like or what hours you do it or where you do it from, that's really key.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so before we move on from this section, you mentioned learning to listen to your intuition again. And that's another sort of word that I feel like turns some people off because they don't really understand what it means.
Yeah,
And
I
so I'm
didn't for
just
a
gonna
long
share,
time.
yeah, for real. I mean, it's not like, oh, I just know things. um, No, it's sort of the body's built up conditioning over the years. All of the lessons that you've learned, all of the nervous system dysregulation that you've experienced and overcome, that all informs your intuition so that your body, your brain is able to make those snap decisions when we're facing 5 million bits of stimuli at once, right? To
I
keep
love how
ourselves
you said
safe.
that. Yeah, all of the experience and all of that wisdom informs your intuition, which is another way to say that is it helps you interpret the messages from your intuition. So you know what you want. When you're in a regulated state, and preferably a chronically regulated state as your baseline state of existence, which it can take some work depending on where you are. It took me a lot of work. Honestly, it took me years to get into that as my baseline. But yeah, and then you learn how to listen to and listen for your intuition and learn how to interpret it based on body awareness, nervous system literacy, and all of the wisdom and experience, all the choices that were helpful to you in the past, all the choices that were unhelpful to you in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that I went back for that. Actually, and that's sort of another thing. I feel like this intuition idea is related to the somatic experience, the sensory processing stuff that we're so going back to the brightness and the sort of busyness of the office. Um, um, in order to function in these environments, we're taught from a very early age that we need to ignore like maybe the messages that our body is saying, oh, this is too much. Oh, we need to slow down. Oh, I don't like this, right? We're taught to sort of push through those. And so you build up this process, decades of ignoring your intuition or ignoring your sensory needs. And now you don't know how to listen to yourself anymore. And you don't know what the sensations in your body mean anymore.
Yeah, that learned um I'm just gonna kind of make up a term because it makes sense to my brain. It's like learned suppression. I'm suppressing those bits of information that my brain and body are sending to me so that if I pretend that I don't feel something, then I don't have to deal with it. And that was how I lived, right? If I didn't feel other emotions that I didn't know how to deal with, I just pretended that they weren't there. I suppressed those things. Um, Whether they were emotions, whether they were sensory needs, um, etc. If I suppress those things, I don't have to deal with them. And that is what a lot of people learn is because we aren't taught how to be emotionally literate. We're not taught how to be literate with our nervous system. Most of us don't even know how it works. Um, and until we get which is very helpful. I'm pointing that out, not to say anything negative, but to say it's really helpful for a lot of us to understand how something works so we can understand why it matters and then act from that place. Because it's really hard for a lot of us to do something, even when we know it's good for us, right? Like exercise or eating right, whatever. If we know it's good for us, but we don't really have a good picture of how the thing works and why it really matters.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes we even forget, the about the looking for the positives. But yeah. Um, yeah.
It would be useful for me to share a little bit about just some like little quick things about the nervous system. I don't know if that's something that's already been covered pretty widely on here
No, not
or
yet. We're gonna do it so many times. Definitely
yeah,
share.
good.
Yeah, definitely share. Because I agree it's super important. And it's sort of like, how do you even start? Like,
Where do you
how do you
start?
even start to teach them? Because I mean, okay, I'm even gonna say again, like the nervous system isn't just your brain.
Right. It's not just your brain. Yeah, I have this wonderful chart that I drew. So what I'll do is I'll explain it so that it makes sense to kind of the salient points rather than like all of the points.
Gotcha.
And I do have a thing where I'll get to like the sympathetic and the parasympathetic and an easy way to remember those two, which is going to be
Yes.
helpful to understanding like how it works and what causes it to get imbalanced and then some signs, some physical signs and some emotional signs. I've kind of divided it.
That's
Is that
perfect. And
helpful?
that'll take,
Okay,
yes, and that's going to take us right into our exercise.
perfect. Okay. So
Yeah.
you pause me when we get there in case I get like a little long-winded at all. So one thing that was really helpful for me to learn about the nervous system was I heard all of these different terms. There's like the central nervous system, and there's the autonomic nervous system, and the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. There's all these different nervous systems, and I found it very confusing. So what I did for myself as I was learning all of this is I made myself a chart so that I could visually see, so it connects from like the top down and it shows all these different branches. Now that's how my brain works, and that worked really well for me. But kind of big picture, so we've got the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So those two things are at the very, very top, right? So the central nervous system is your brain and your spinal cord. Everything else falls under the broad category of the peripheral nervous system. So when you hear things like sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, the somatic nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system, those are all under the peripheral nervous system. So again, central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, peripheral nervous system, everything else, and it has subsystems. So what we most often colloquially talk about as nervous system dysregulation, that typically falls under the autonomic nervous system, which has two branches, sympathetic and parasympathetic. And if there's a very easy way to remember this, so I'll tell you what each of them controls, and then I'll tell you the easy way to remember the difference. So the sympathetic nervous system controls your stress responses. The parasympathetic nervous system controls rest and digest. So an easy way to remember what those two do, think of sympathetic, S equals stress. Parasympathetic, P equals peace. Because if you're physically in kind of a peaceful state, a calm state, then you're going to be able to rest and digest. So that was helpful for me, but
I
the
do always
two
struggle with
systems.
that one. Like which one? Because
Yeah,
one of
me
them
too.
controls you getting stressed, and the other one controls you calming down. So it's really important to know the difference.
Exactly. Exactly. Because if you understand what they do, then you understand what you're working with, right? So the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system are always trying to be in balance. Now, nervous system dysregulation just means when one of those two subsystems is out of balance. And typically we find ourselves in a situation where the sympathetic nervous system, the stress one, is dominant. And we're kind of stuck in this fight or flight. That's where you'll hear a lot of people say that, they're stuck in fight or flight, fight or freeze. And that's kind of where we most commonly think of nervous system dysregulation. So some of the things that can cause your nervous system dysregulation is things like chronic stress, kind of like I was talking about in my, my career years, where I just ran myself into the ground trying to prove my worth to myself and probably to everyone else through my career, right? So I just worked myself into a chronic stress state. Another one is not sleeping well or enough for you. And that could be like a whole other topic. Dietary deficiencies, nutrient deficiencies. So if your body isn't getting what it actually needs on a cellular level to function, you're going to be in a state of dysregulation because your body's kind of, in a very casual way to say, it's kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have what it really needs in order to help you shift out of the sympathetic, the stress side, into the parasympathetic, the rest and digest side. So another couple of reasons that your nervous system gets dysregulated is because of unprocessed emotional experiences, aka trauma with a big T, trauma with a little t, some type of unprocessed emotional experience. And then for neurodivergent folks, another one is chronic environmental overstimulation and not knowing how to maybe not knowing what those things are, and therefore not knowing how to help your system uh, go into a more calm state of where there's less stimulation in your environment. And from there, I can talk about the symptoms of nervous system dysregulation and break them down into um, maybe 5 or 6 physical signs and 5 or 6 mental emotional signs.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. Um, I mean, chronic stress, that's such a broad category. That could be self-imposed, that could
It
be sort
is.
of from external factors. Um, but the not being able to get out of that state is really where the imbalance comes, right? Because we're always going to experience stressors. Things in life happen, but it's the body not responding with the proper counterbalance, the body not activating the parasympathetic nervous system. Um, so how might someone experience physically the imbalance? Like what might be some symptoms of a nervous system imbalance?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I like to break this apart into kind of some physical signs and some emotional signs. And then I do like to break that down a little bit further, which I'll do again in a moment, where it's kind of like the stuff that you might notice in the moment versus what you might notice long term. Because if you have been stuck in a fight or flight mode for a long time, like I was kind of describing earlier in my own kind of career burnout experiences, you might be experiencing numbness in terms of like mental emotional numbness, where you're just like kind of in this sort of frozen state and you're not as aware of what's going on. You know, this will make a little more sense. Let me go ahead into some of the physical signs, because some of the stuff that I'll talk about that you'll notice in the moment might not be as aware or available for you to be aware of. I'll put it that way. So some physical signs that you might notice in the moment, you might notice your heartbeat is fast. You might notice that your breathing is fast or shallow, or both, maybe. You might also notice that you've got some tension. Maybe you've got your palms are clenched into fists and you don't even realize it. Maybe you're clenched in your kind of guts region. You're sort of holding your stomach. Maybe your shoulders and your traps and your neck are scrunched up and maybe even hunched a little bit. A lot of tension. Yeah, some people, for them, they'll like clench up their feet even in their shoes. So really head to toe, there could be tension in all these different places. That's a really big sign that something's off in that moment. So those are some of the ones that are kind of in the moment that you can kind of notice and like, oh, okay, I see something is out of whack here. Something is off balance. Some of the longer term signs that you might have nervous system dysregulation could be like ongoing digestive problems or ongoing sleep problems, a variety of those, right? Like it could be like trouble going to sleep, trouble staying asleep, trouble, waking up and you're still exhausted, that type of thing. Something else that was a big one for me, and a lot of people have this too, is you'll have these kind of mystery body pains and symptoms. And you might go to the doctor and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're fine. But you know that something is off and you just continue to have these kind of physical, symptoms and things going on. You're like, what are these mysterious ailments that I have? Like, what's wrong with me? And it's a buildup of this stuff in your physical body. So, okay, so we talked about the physical side. Let's talk about the emotional and mental side. In the moment, you could notice that your emotions are kind of on a hair trigger. So maybe your responses don't match the situation, and you feel like maybe you're like instantly kind of having this sort of emotional blow up and not feeling like you're able to really control that. Like it's got to come out. You might also have a really hard time concentrating or focusing. You might have memory problems, recalling stuff from earlier in the day or, the day before or whatever. Your mind might feel like a tornado. This is one that I kind of describe where you've just got so much flying around your mind so quickly, so fast, you can't hear yourself think. And that can lead to emotional numbness, where you just like, you're kind of just shut down. Um, that physical
Yeah, you
exhaustion that can
can't
happen, and your mind is just like frozen. You're just like, I don't even know what's going on. I don't even know what to do. I don't feel anything. I'm just
process.
exhausted. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine there's like a million excuses or other explanations for any number of these things, like the fast heart rate, and the sleep issues. I mean, I even going to the doctor with like the random pains and then, finally getting the high inflammatory blood marker and they're like, "Oh, surely there's something wrong with you," but then still never finding anything.
Yeah.
It'd
It's
be really hard.
disheartening and confusing because you're like,
Yeah.
you know that something isn't right. And
Right.
even if you have doctors, like for my experience, I had multiple doctors telling me, you're fine, your blood work is fine, you're young, whatever, whatever, whatever. All of these things, they were just telling me all these things that should have, like, I should have been fine, but I clearly wasn't. I was suffering. You could see it from a physical, like external looking at me kind of place. And I was very much suffering internally. And you don't know. And then you start to feel like, well, am I crazy? Or am I just super dramatic? Am I making a big deal out of this? And I'm actually like just a weak person. And I just need to like pull it together and toughen up, because a lot of us learn those phrases as we're growing up, and they are, I honestly believe this. I think they're meant with love, trying to help us survive a world that it's not really built for well-being. But those
Mhm.
phrases are very unhelpful. But we carry them with
Extremely
us into adulthood.
unhelpful. Sure do.
Yeah.
They become like internalized sort of values that we like don't even realize we're upholding sometimes.
Yeah.
Like when we're terrified to call out of work because, we don't want someone to think this, that, or the other thing about us. Um,
Yeah.
and the other thing that I noticed about all of those symptoms of nervous system dysregulation is it's a lot of like longing for basic needs, the
Yes.
sleep, the food,
Yes.
the like peace. Those are all really basic needs. Autonomy, another one.
Yeah. Exactly. You nailed it on the head there perfectly. This idea, I'm going to circle it, zoom in on one specific, which is rest. Oh, so
Mhm.
many of us, like it's culturally, socially, however you want to say it, conditioned into us that rest is a luxury. Rest is a reward. Rest is optional. None of those three things is true. Rest is equal to air that you need. It's equal to water that you need and food that you need. You cannot survive without rest. And the most common way we think of rest is sleep, but there are many forms of rest. That could be like a whole other episode. But that's
Yes.
one that's really, yeah, it's a
I
really
maybe I
unhelpful,
should.
unhealthy belief that holds us back. And so then we do exactly like you say, like we feel really bad calling out of work when we're legitimately sick, and we shouldn't go to the workplace because we'll get other people sick. But we feel guilty, like, oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm too weak. I can't do this. And we try to push through. It just doesn't need to be that way.
It really doesn't. Um, and that's why it's so important to have like, you know, empowering things to talk about with each other, but then also these very real like strategies that we can do to help push our nervous system into a regulated state, to help try to activate that parasympathetic nervous system, for example. Um, Gosh, when I was preparing for this episode, I think there were hundreds of exercises that we could have been talking about right now, like
Yeah.
journaling and visualizations and like meditations and physical actual like dancing stuff. Um Obviously we can't do all of that today, But I am going to let Lindsay lead us in a little exercise so that we can maybe be a little bit more at peace in our everyday.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It is an overwhelming amount of options when we think about how to help ourselves have balance, how to help ourselves have more self-awareness, and just try to have a life that feels really good to wake up into on a weekday, right? Which is such a struggle for so many of us. So I typically, we're not going to do all these obviously today, but I typically will work with my clients with three specific tools because they are tools that you can do anytime, anywhere. No matter what's going on for you, you can find a way to do one of these three things. And those three things are belly breathing, what I call messy journaling, or you can just call it journaling, um, and then walk, which you can do even indoors if that's all you have access to. Just walk around your room if that's all you can do, right? But today, what I want to kind of focus on is the importance of belly breathing because it is so fast and so impactful. It's incredibly powerful, but the way that you do it is really the key. So belly breathing, I know a lot of us can have a little self-consciousness about our belly, and we don't want to make it big, but this is what needs to happen for belly breathing. So if that is applicable to you and you feel really uncomfortable with that, feel free to put your hands over your belly while you do this. If that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable, that's perfectly okay. So take a breath in, and as you do that, push your belly outward because most of us will typically breathe in with our lungs, with our chest and kind of our shoulders, like in an upward motion. So instead, belly breathing is about pushing, as you breathe in, push your belly out because you're physically giving your lungs more space to expand. And then slowly exhale. The magic is really in that slow exhale on a physiological level and what that's doing for your body and your brain and calming your system. And I tell people, I'll tell my clients, if you only do one, that's great, but really strive to do at least three. It gives you something to focus on in the moment. It gets you into the present moment. And it is on a very physiological level, giving your body and your brain more calmness. So if that's the only thing that you walk away with today, belly breathing and that technique, I'm really happy that more people can have that as a quick one little thing that you can do no matter what is going on for you in your life.
Yeah, I mean, and for everybody listening, I feel like I had to do at least three just to get my belly really to come out. Cause
Yeah,
like you said, I had such a resistance to breathing in with
yeah,
my belly. Like my chest was like, no, we got this. I'm like, no, I had
yeah,
to actually push it down to let my belly. And maybe it's how I'm standing. Maybe if I were laying down. I think I'm going to take this one and I'm going to play with it in different positions. Maybe laying down, I might
yeah.
have an easier time doing belly breathing. But yeah, I mean, and I've always been a very slim person. So I don't have a lot of like negative feelings about my body, but definitely it's always been ingrained how I'm supposed to hold my body.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
belly breathing was not part of like the allowable.
Yeah, it's
So
so
yeah,
funny
we
that it's the natural way to breathe, but it is not normal to us. So it feels unnatural to us. And a lot of us do have kind of, body image challenges from a mental emotional perspective. Changing your position that you're doing it in, just find a way that it can feel that you can allow yourself to do it. Give yourself permission to do it and then pay very close attention to how it makes you feel. And the more you pay attention to how great it makes you feel and how fast it makes you feel better, then it will get a little bit easier for you to do that belly breathing.
feeling tingling in my cheeks and like my jaw. So obviously I'm smiling and stuff a lot in this episode. So maybe it's just from
Yeah.
that tension. Tension isn't always bad, but yeah, I definitely am really glad that we. Do you want to also do some deep breathing? I feel like you got to just you had to explain it all, so I got to have all the good breathing fun.
That's okay. I've actually been doing my own deep breathing sort of throughout this, because for me, when I'm in an unfamiliar situation, or a new situation, kind of like being on this podcast, even though I'm excited and I'm glad to be here, it's new, it's unfamiliar to me. So, what people aren't seeing is me doing the belly breathing while we're on this episode. And I'm also tossing around a little kind of fidget toy. So I'm doing things like while we're talking that are helping me be regulated. And after this call, I'll probably do a couple other exercises that are just things that I know that are
And
good
I
for
never
me.
would see that. Before I move on, I also just want to repeat again what you said. The exhale is where the magic happens. The exhale is what activates your parasympathetic nervous system. It activates the peace. I went 35 years without knowing that very important information, and I don't want you to have to live another day without knowing that the exhale is where the peace happens. I purse my lips a lot when I'm exhaling, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, just it's creating a little bit of tension here, but it's helping me to like have another somatic point for release. So, and if that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because if you do that, if you kind of purse your lips almost like the shape of a straw, or even imagine that you're kind of blowing out through a straw. That's why those necklaces that are the breathe anti-anxiety necklaces are so powerful, because it forces your air out more slowly. And what this actually does is it's literally slowing down your heart rate and giving your body that calmness. It really works, and I love it because it's so simple and you can do it anywhere. And it works so fast.
Oh, yes, amazing. Okay, Lindsey, I am so glad you are here. It has been so great to meet you. I hope to continue this relationship now that we have built. How can other people get to know you? Maybe somebody wants to work with you. Where can people find you?
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for having me. This has been an absolute delight and a joy. It's been really exciting. I hope that if nothing else, that people will take away the importance of belly breathing. But if people want to go another step and kind of check out me, check out my vibe, my work, you can find me at my website, which is my first and last name, which I'm sure Sarah will have linked. It's lindseykee.com. Pretty simple. lindseykee.com.
Yeah, and also just a reminder that she's on LinkedIn as her primary sort of social presence. So that's where you can go and look for her, as I will be doing in case I haven't already.
That would be great. Yeah, reach out, send a message, whatever. If anybody has questions or anything, there's a way to contact me on my website, or through LinkedIn as well. Yeah, that'd be great.
So for our final question here, I am just shuffling up my confidence boosting deck from the We're Not Really Strangers company, and I'm just going to ask you a question and see what we get.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. This is a new one. Okay. What's a promise that you've made to yourself and kept?
Okay, I love that. When I Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm going to tell just a little tiny short story. This was my journey. This is not the journey for everybody. And so if this isn't yours, that's okay, right? But when I decided to quit the corporate world and go away from the 9 to 5 lifestyle, I promised myself that I would never, ever take on any work that made me feel burned out, exhausted, sick ever again. And I have kept that promise. And sometimes that comes with hard choices when I get an opportunity that comes my way. And I'm like, oh, I could do that. Oh, that might be really nice for, maybe there's a financial component that I'm excited about. Or maybe it's like an ego moment where it's like, oh, I could be really good at, such and such opportunity. And it doesn't align with me anymore. And I have to really check in with myself and my gut instincts to know I could do that, but I also could have XYZ reaction. I could feel drained. I could
Yes.
feel it could just take too much from me.
At what cost?
At what cost? Yeah. So that is one promise that I made to myself, that I would always weigh any future, even,
Every
work
single
opportunities,
time,
but
I imagine.
anything, everything. Yeah, I mean, that came to the types of relationships that I allowed in my life, romantic relationships, friendships, even family relationships. So if something was draining or causing me to be unwell or just not good for me, even if there was really nothing wrong with the situation or the other party or the other opportunity, if it didn't feel right for me or good for me, I wasn't going to do it. And I continue to live that. Love that question. Great question.
Yeah, I'm super happy about this. Yeah, it was perfect for you. Um, yeah, it can be really hard to sort of live your values, um, even if it's just like the perfect opportunity, but at the wrong time too. That's like you've already got too many things on. Like that's still even a chance for you to say like, sorry, like right now is a bad time.
Yeah.
But it could be so hard. I've worked with so many like super high achieving people who just like want to take on all of the things because they have something to add, right? Like they have a passion, they have the capacity. What they don't necessarily have is the time.
Or the energy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, the
sure.
time, the
Yeah.
energy, the emotional capacity. There's so many things, and you're exactly right. Especially among high achievers, we're like, I could make that so much easier for everybody involved. It could be really quick and fast. I could do something to improve that situation. But what am I saying no to by saying yes to that thing? And what would I rather say yes to? That's more aligned with me. That's going to be more fulfilling and fill me up instead.
That is a wonderful question to end this show with. Lindsey, it was great to meet you. I will
You
definitely
too.
put all of the, thank you. I'll definitely put all of the links so that people can find you in the show notes. And I will also put a copy of that chart if you want to send me an email of that. Because I think that that is probably way more valuable than you realize.
Okay. Yep, that sounds great.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, everybody, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. If you want to connect with the Neurodivergent Report, you can find us at ND Report Pod on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and YouTube. If you're looking to support the show, the best thing you can do is to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Please. You can check out ndreportpod.com for more information, or if you want to be a guest contributor. Until next time, be well, do good.